Is there a board member who would like to start? Director Miller.
I know that all of us on this board may not always agree on everything, but I think all of us can agree that none of us ran to serve our community and then face this challenge before us. I also want to thank all of you who took the time to meet with me, to have a Zoom meeting, to have coffee, to take the time to talk with me about your concerns, as well as community meetings where we were able to spend time with you as well and hear your voices. When we are faced with a crisis, people need to hear two things: truth and hope. Let's start with some painful truths about the mess in which we find ourselves. Jeffco is in the middle of a rapidly worsening financial crisis with continued enrollment declines, reducing revenue, and COVID federal aid that ends in 2024. And even as our enrollment was declining, according to JCEA's presentation to the board just last spring, we continued to increase our staffing levels. Further, despite falling revenue, our costs are significantly higher. While every organization wants to compensate their employees fairly, the reality is that depending on the circumstances, not all can increase pay without triggering a financial crisis. When this board approved a $67 million increase in employment compensation this year, that will continue to increase in future budget cycles, we brought our salaries in line with our surrounding communities, but at a cost that tonight we have to face. This year, the district is projected to run a $34 million deficit in our general fund, and an overall deficit spend across all funds is more than $40 million. The general fund deficit spend alone is projected to total $133 million over the next 3 years if we do nothing. When a district begins to draw on reserves, Colorado state law requires school districts to prepare a plan to eliminate their budget deficit. Hope is not a plan. Therefore, we must develop a comprehensive plan to not only move away from the deficit spend, but build back to a stronger fiscal position. Closing schools is just one part of that plan, but that alone won't come close to closing a $40 million gap. Staff reduction to serve a smaller student population will almost certainly be needed. So how did we get here? For the past decade, Jeffco management and boards have kept small schools open by cutting their arts, music, and phys ed classes, and forcing our teachers to teach multiple grades in the same classroom with stretched resources. We also moved vulnerable populations into smaller schools to help improve enrollment numbers without a thoughtful pathway for where these children would be served after they left elementary school. When Jeffco did acknowledge the enrollment challenge, we acted without forethought. One example is the closing of Pleasant View in 2017. When the board closed that Title I school, the district sent the children to Sheldon and Welchester, non-Title I schools. The Title I supports did not follow the children, and that impacted those children in the communities that welcomed them into the fold. That is one of the lessons we learned. That same year, we tried to address the declining utilization of our middle schools by moving our 6th graders to middle school for the 18-19 school year. We hoped that we would shore up our elementary schools with preschool students. This was not realized. Further, during that time, Jeffco continued to add staff and increase compensation while we experienced declining academic results and falling student enrollment in our district-run neighborhood schools. As many of you are now aware, our neighborhood schools have lost over 11,000 students. Our predecessors refused to deal with this growing crisis and kept kicking the can down the road. And as I said in August, we have now run out of road. It has thus fallen upon this management team and this board to finally act with a long overdue sense of urgency to resolve the many challenges facing the district so that we may better serve our children. Unfortunately, the need for us to act urgently has made many people angry, as we heard this evening, and it has reduced their trust in Jeffco and its leaders. Tonight's vote won't solve the crisis we face, but it is necessary and unavoidable part of the solution. We still must help many children transition to new schools, some of which will be using different curriculum. We must manage the transition of critical special education and other programs to new schools. To close our budget deficit, we must make hard decisions about staff changes and what to do with our 16 closed schools. And starting in January, we must begin to look beyond this year and look to a 3 to 5 year plan that incorporates secondary schools, pathways in our articulation areas, and management of our fixed assets. Above all, we must find the money we need to pay for initiatives to recover our children's COVID learning losses and substantially improve their academic outcomes. Because that is why this district exists, to educate our children. In an affluent, educated suburb like Jeffco, having 70% of our sixth graders fail to meet state proficiency standards in math is totally unacceptable. And it's setting them up to fail in the 21st century economy. We owe them a better future than that. So where is the hope? Turning around a $1.4 billion organization like Jeffco is an immense challenge. And our vote tonight is just one of the many steps we will have to take in this long, hard process. But now that many more people in our county, our state, and indeed our nation understand the breadth and depth of the multiple crises we are facing, they're going to be paying much closer attention to how we respond. And that's going to be responding to the tough questions about how we're spending our $1 billion a year that our taxpayers have trusted us to use wisely. The public is going to demand improvements in our process for deciding on school closures. They want it done with them, not to them. The public is going to demand to be fully involved in deciding what to do with the closed schools in their neighborhoods, schools that the district has spent millions of bond money upgrading. The public is going to demand more urgency from Jeffco in substantially improving our children's academic results and reversing the decline in district enrollment and revenue we need to stabilize. The public is going to demand we do better for our most vulnerable students, our children of color that are impacted by these proposed closures. The reality is that we as a board can no longer turn our backs on these students and provide them with less than the ideal learning experiences. We as a board must have the courage to say no more. All children deserve better. Above all, my reason to be hopeful tonight is that the citizens of Jefferson County are never going to forget that thriving schools aren't an end in of themselves. They are a means to achieve our fundamental purpose, graduating academically proficient young adults who will thrive in the 21st century economy. For more than a decade, we did not stay laser focused on our most important role, ensuring that all Jeffco children have access to high quality and rich academic programming. That is our sole job. I hope we as Jeffco never again lose that focus. Thank you.